going to invite our first speaker of the day here to the stage. So Ryan, please join me here. So while Ryan is getting up here, he's the director of marketing at Animals. Animals is, one of the better known content marketing agencies out there, known for their high quality content. Since they're doing content marketing for a lot of premium brands that you know and love, he has a lot of insights to what works or doesn't. He has 10 years of experience as a writer himself, so he knows how to write, how to strategize about content, and all those things. So here we go, Ryan, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. No delay, let's get straight on with it. So today, I'm going to be talking to you about effectively the opposite of boring, tired old SEO content. I'm going to be talking to you instead about opinions, how you can harness wild, contrarian opinions to actually improve your content marketing, to earn traffic, backlinks, and social proof, and stand out from all the noise, all the dross that's out there today. So by way of a bit of context, a long time ago when I was a younger, less haggard-looking content marketer, imagine like long flowing locks, I was very guilty of assuming that content marketing and SEO were basically the same thing. As far as I understood, there was no daylight between the two concepts. And that meant that every single article I ever created was always built around a target keyword. My entire research process was built on keywords. That was it. There was no other way for me to create content. And that meant that I created a whole bunch of content that looked exactly like this. So this is the ultimate guide to SaaS pricing models, strategies, and psychological hacks. And buried within the 6,000 words or so of content here, you are going to find every imaginable variant of SaaS pricing keyword crammed into every header, H2s, H3s, you name it. And this type of content, it did one thing very, very well. Even so 5 or 6 years after it was originally published, today it still ranks for over 1,000 different keywords. Again, every imaginable variant of SaaS pricing. But a crucial data point that's missing that you won't find in any SEO tool or analytics suite is that for the final year I was at this agency creating this type of content, this content generated exactly $0 in new revenue for our agency. There were other factors at play, like sales process problems, but with hindsight, I realized a really important thing was missing. It's not just enough to get people to find your company. It's not just enough to even get the right people at the right time to your company. The missing element is trust. You need to demonstrate expertise. You need to build your credibility and your authority in the subject matter. And that whole process, that long, arduous process of earning their trust before they'll part with their money, this type of content kind of sucks at doing that. And there are a host of reasons for it. If you read an article like this, any ultimate guide, you may as well be reading a Wikipedia page in most cases. It is forgettable. It is boring. If you even get to the end of the 6,000 words, you are going to have no lasting impression of the brand or the personality behind that content. It's also entirely non-expert. I am a lifelong content marketer. I know nothing about SaaS pricing. And to write this and to rank for those 1,000 keywords, I didn't even have to interview a single SaaS pricing expert. And as a result, there is no value add with this content, with this type of content generally in a lot of cases. All it does is the classic skyscraper approach of consolidating what everyone else has already written into one place. It adds nothing new to the discourse. And as a result, this is boring as hell. It sucks to write, it sucks to read in a lot of cases, and it has a very questionable impact on your business. Now compare that to this beautiful article by Heaton Shah, Why Trello Failed to Build a $1 billion+ Business. This was one of the very first articles I ever read after I joined Animals, and it perfectly encapsulates a lot of how we think about content marketing. So I happen to know within very few days of publication, this had already racked up over 150,000 views, generated over 100 really great backlinks, and actually gone viral on Hacker News. And it did that by doing the exact opposite of that ultimate guide style content. Instead of being utilitarian, it is contrarian through and through. It shares a strong opinion. That encourages discussion, that leads to people sharing it on social media as they discuss it, that generates links as people share it with each other for comment. It is truly expert as well. You read through this and you leave with the impression that Hiten Shah knows the startup world better than most people do. And that's because there is a huge amount of value add in this type of content. He brings new data to the table. He adds opinions you've not seen anywhere else, and he adds original analysis. In short, the discourse is changed by this article. There is new information brought to the table. And as a result, this really stands out. It is not another samey SEO post, and it has a much bigger impact on the business as well. Now, the key point to take away from this, generally, opinionated content like Heaton's article is strong where lots of SEO content is weak. So my ultimate guide, it did one thing very, very well, and that was generate compounding traffic, as lots of search articles do. You target a bunch of keywords, month after month, you'll probably see predictable increases in traffic. But what it was less good at doing, building links, for example. A lot of SEO content is very situationally useful. It's useful to a certain type of person at a certain moment in time, and they are not incentivized to share it with anyone else. It was bad at generating leads because it didn't demonstrate our expertise or credibility. It was bad for growing an audience because it wasn't interesting, and it was bad for sharing our brand messaging because we were constrained by what the keyword needed us to share. Heaton's article is the exact opposite of that. It doesn't benefit from compounding traffic in the same way because it doesn't use keyword distribution, but it was much better at building links, care of that strong opinion. It was better at generating leads because it shared expertise. It was interesting enough to make people want to come back again and keep reading. And it was great for sharing his personal branding, his company ideas, because he was not constrained by SEO. Now, Hitton's article and opinionated content generally is a subset of thought leadership. This is one of those terms that gets bandied around all the time, really nebulous, means a lot of different things to different people. But we at Animals have a very concrete definition we like to use. Thought leadership is the sharing of earned secrets. Now, this is a phrase that comes to us by way of the venture capital company Andreessen Horowitz. The basic premise is that you, by virtue of being you, the experiences you have, the people you know, the problems you've solved, you have unique perspectives on the world that you can share in your content. If you share those earned secrets, you begin that arduous process of building trust, demonstrating credibility and expertise as well. And we help lots and lots of companies get started with this thought leadership process. And this is one of the tools we use to help them do that. 5 types of thought leadership, 5 access points. This is everything from using your network, something that First Round Review does really well, getting the people within its network to add commentary to what might otherwise be boring questions and topics. You can use your expertise to add commentary to industry events or data sets, or you can even share your personal narrative, the events that have happened to you in your life. But the one we're going to focus on today, the one that I think is the easiest access point and probably the most effective, is the counter-narrative opinion. Hitton's article is a great example of that. This is also something that Basecamp do very, very well. Every blog post, every book they've ever published has been designed to challenge the status quo. So, assuming you're sold on the idea of actually using opinions in your content marketing, there are 3 relatively simple steps I recommend starting with. The first of these is identifying industry truisms. What are the general facts or ideas that people assume to be true and rarely question within your industry? In content marketing, for example, maybe this is the idea that SEO tools are essential for creating high-performing content. The second step is to begin constructing your counter narrative. This is where your wild opinion comes in. Maybe the counter narrative to that truism is that actually SEO tools encourage homogeneity and they can actually worsen performance. The third step is the distribution component. We are big fans of what we call coined concepts, and I'll dig into this in a lot more detail. So a great starting point is just trying to list as many of these truisms as you possibly can within your own industry. There are plenty of places to look for these. Best practices are probably the richest source. The thing about a best practice is by the time you've heard it, it's probably not as effective as it used to be because everyone knows about it and everyone is using it. These often make them ripe for counter-narrative opinions. What are some of the common assumptions that underlie the operating principles of your industry? What are the ideas that people never think to challenge because that's just the way it's always been? What are some of the messages your competitors are sharing through their sales and marketing? Even your sales conversations, what are you hearing from prospects time and time again? These true principles that crop up in every conversation you have. This is an exercise I regularly do for our own blog because this is a technique we make use of. And within content marketing, these are a few of the truisms. So I mentioned the SEO tools one. The idea that blogs should be treated like media publications as well. I hear that talked about a lot as companies look up to the likes of Intercom or First Round Review. Even the idea that HubSpot is the best possible example of content marketing. Now, armed with your list of, say, 20 truisms, it's really important to try and whittle those back to the most high leverage ideas to go up against. 3 ways to do that. Always choose concepts that reflect sincerely held beliefs. What we don't want to do is create controversy for controversy's sake. The thing that Basecamp do particularly well as well is choosing opinions that align with their business goals. DHH, for example, he doesn't wildly opine about anything that takes his fancy. He is actually very strategic about the vendettas they develop and publicize. Funnily enough, critiquing the value of meetings, that's a pretty great marketing strategy for a company that offers project management software. And always choose arguments that can be backed up with evidence. We don't want to get into this kind of vitriolic state where we're pitting opinion versus opinion. We don't want a shouting match. We want to make reasoned, well thought through arguments. The next step is to actually construct your counter narrative. So these are generally edge cases where that truism does not hold up. We're looking for faulty logic where maybe there's an element of that truism that actually, if you think through it, it doesn't make sense. Or even real world examples where your experience proves out that that truism is false. So for the idea that HubSpot is the best example of content marketing, well, actually, my experience says the strategy HubSpot used a decade ago does not work today. The idea that SEO tools are essential for creating high-performing content, well, actually, I think they encourage homogeneity and can worsen performance if they are over-relied upon. Or the idea that blogs should be treated like media publications. From our experience, most companies are actually better served by thinking about their blogs as libraries of information. Now, armed with your counter narrative, obviously the hard thing is persuading people that it's true. We could write an entire, give an entire presentation on how to construct an argument, how to write your article, but a very useful heuristic, a very useful starting point is this article structure. So thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's also known as Hegelian dialectic if you want to do some homework. But the basic premise is you start by articulating the status quo, your truism. You go on to refute the status quo and present your alternative argument. So that's your counter-narrative opinion. And then you use the body of your argument, your article, your tweet storm, your LinkedIn post to try and reconcile these 2 points and actually reach a conclusion. Any idea is probably quite nebulous, quite complex, quite hard to communicate, and that can limit how well it spreads. So one of the techniques we use to overcome this is the idea of a coined concept. In a nutshell, it's a memorable catchphrase that encapsulates your ideas and your arguments. We use this all the time in our marketing. We use this all the time with our customers. One of my favorite ways is to actually borrow existing concepts from adjacent fields. So the idea of strategy that HubSpot used doesn't work as well today. I actually did some digging into a bit of business theory and came upon the idea of the second mover advantage. This is the idea that you don't have to be the first entrant into a market, that there may actually be an advantage to being the second or the last entrant, because you can take stock of what's happened before and engineer your strategy to match. So we've then used that principle, the idea of the second mover advantage, and that's become our coined concept. It makes this entire idea much more easy to communicate. You can also popularize existing concepts as well. So the idea that SEO tools encourage homogeneity, that's kind of boring, that's a hell of a mouthful. We anchored it around this idea of copycat content. It's a familiar phrase, it's probably been around as long as content marketing has, but we gave it a new lease of life. And that image on the right is a bunch of incredibly smart people, including Derek, who I know is speaking today, using the term copycat content within the context that we are able to set up using our opinions. And the hardest thing, but possibly the most valuable thing, is creating from scratch. Most blogs should be treated like libraries of information. We created the idea of libraries versus publications as a way of reducing this to a catchy, pithy argument. Now, obviously, opinionated content, we do not have the luxury of sitting and waiting for SEO traffic to roll in. We're not targeting keywords. So it's important to be deliberate with the distribution channels you use. We found a few that work really, really well. Earned newsletter mentions in particular. This is probably one of the most useful things to do. For every customer we work with, we often spend time identifying the biggest industry roundups, curators or Substack commentators within their given industry. The hardest part of their job is sourcing high quality content. So often sending them an email, following them, or DMing them on a social media platform is enough to actually get your content a featured spot in their newsletters each week. And that regularly drives tens of thousands of visits to our opinionated content. Debate-focused social media as well. Some social platforms are basically tailor-made for opinions. They are designed to facilitate discussion and debate. If I think about our most popular content in terms of sheer traffic numbers, it's almost always the articles that have gone viral on Hacker News, on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. The example on the right was an incredible discussion for and against that article I shared earlier by Heaton. And dark social as well. These are things like Slack, Discord, Telegram, big, strong communities of engaged professionals that don't often show up in your analytics. These people are often a bit more discerning when it comes to content, so you don't want to promote it in the same way, but often sharing your idea, making it a discussion, encouraging people to comment and debate on your opinion is a great way of seeding that initial distribution. As a bonus, which I won't go into because there's another talk later today, Andy Crestodina, all about this topic, but actually adding strong opinions to bland SEO can dramatically improve search content. It's something that Wirecutter does really well. When the 10 articles in the search results are hedging their bets and offering a list of the top 20 DSLR cameras, if you do the hard thing of offering one opinionated choice, that's going to stand out in a pretty huge way. The final slide. Because we don't have the benefit of compounding traffic or compounding keywords to act as directional indicators to let us know that we're doing well, we normally rely on more qualitative signs of success with opinionated thought leadership. One of the most potent of these is the idea that sales prospects will actually reference your content, your opinions back to you during the sales process. This is something we find all the time. People come to us because our opinions resonated with them or challenged with them. And that makes the sales process so much easier because they're already bought into your ethos. They understand how your brand thinks. The most rewarding aspect of this is actually seeing other people and companies, even competitors, picking up your terminology, your language, your opinions, and building them into their own discussions as well. You will see them referenced without any linking back to you, without any reference that you are the originator. Instead, you are subtly influencing the entire discourse of what is happening in your industry. And all of this leads to what we sometimes call a natural upswelling of brand awareness. A lot of people come to us and they say, I have no idea how I found you. You were just kind of everywhere. Your opinions, they will permeate your entire industry. And that is an incredibly powerful thing, much more powerful than bland, generic SEO content will generally do. And that's it. So thank you for sticking with me for a pretty information-dense 20 minutes there.
Amazing, Ryan. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the chat here. I think you got some raving fans and groupies. We'd be throwing underwear at you would it not be virtual. So a lot of questions also. 6 minutes to go. Let's start cranking. Stuart is saying, is this presentation an example of contrarian thought leadership?
I love that. I mean, yes, this definitely is. I think this entire like series of content is kind of contrarian thought leadership. The status quo, I think, even today is very much that SEO is the organic powerhouse that makes content marketing work. We see with a lot of companies, a lot of customers, that actually stepping away from that and doing something a bit different can be even more powerful today.
Thank you. Next question. Ryan, I want to rank on some easy terms. I think to increase to traffic and help my users indirectly. Would you suggest opinionated articles and Mirage for SEO, or just thought leadership stuff?
I mean, if it's easy content, I'm always a big fan of not over-engineering the solution. This type of content is probably best suited to like really competitive search results or occasions when you want to differentiate from a really crowded marketplace. If you're saying that something's an easy term to go after, maybe just focus on matching the intent, doing a good job there, and yeah, try not to over-engineer the solution a little bit. You can always add in elements of opinionated content, just things to differentiate personal experiences and perspectives, data you happen to have access to. That could be a good way of, without much lift, standing out from all the other SEO content as well.
How does opinionated content work for SaaS products?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, this is what we do for SaaS companies. We work primarily with SaaS companies. Any SaaS product, even the most technical of them, there are still opportunities to challenge the status quo of the industry that they function in. Like we work with lots of companies that target developers. It's highly technical, but these are the kind of people that are allergic to generic SEO content like what is, how-to guides, things like that. So generally a good thing to do is look to the broader industry that your SaaS product sits in. If you've got a tool that works for sales teams, look at sales process generally. There's always so much to comment on. Talk to anyone with like 10 years of experience in that industry and you'll have dozens of ideas to write about.
Multiple questions here about the same thing, which is like, oh, it's easy for this industry, easy for tech, easy for SaaS. What about finance, healthcare, conservative industries, banking, or technical content? Like, can I have an opinionated article about Google Tag Manager stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, the question there is like, do people have differing opinions on each of those subjects? Even like the simplest thing, like how to set up a Google Tag Manager installation, you could probably ask a couple of people and get slightly different nuances on it. I don't think there's a single type of content that can't in some way be improved by opinion, or at least by experience, you having done something and learned something from it that other people aren't talk about. And there are other industries. We work with companies in like 3D printing and manufacture, legal, finance, all of these places. There are always ways to find, to challenge the status quo, the way people are operating. No industry is immune from that, I think.
Stuart is asking, what if a contrarian tone is not in keeping with the master brand tone of voice you've been given?
That's interesting. I think even if you've got like the nicest, cuddliest brand in the world, like there's still nice, subtle ways to approach and gently nudge people towards a different perspective. You don't always have to play like the iconoclast or the bombast, going in, tearing everything down that's come before. A lot of our content, we can approach it by saying, this is the status quo, but from our learned experience, from the things we've done, we think actually maybe there's a slightly different way you can approach this idea or think about this topic. It definitely doesn't have to be abrasive at all. It's just about helping people see that there are alternative perspectives to be had.
Mm-hmm. Emma is saying, so if you're not targeting search terms with the content, are you just only banking on this going viral?
Yeah, so no, absolutely not. It's great when an article does go viral, but that's hard to predict. Doesn't always happen. It's not the sort of thing you want to bet your company's future on. What we're like, Animals is a great example. We've slowly, gradually built an audience of followers through our newsletter, our own distribution channels, through social media. This type of content attracts repeat visitors. While SEO blogs, they are basically like libraries of related information. This is more a publication approach where if you write something that's interesting and contrarian, you are more likely to have people come back to you. So if you do some simple things to facilitate that, like newsletter signups or making your brand handles easily accessible, you can build a slow but steady loyal following without needing to rely on viral content.
Last question here. So how can you write a contrarian article if you have no real world experience in this matter? You're just a writer, dude. You're wanting to write an opinionated article. So what do you do?
Interview people that do have opinions. That's probably the best advice I can offer there. I've done this for loads of industries that I knew nothing about, but you find somebody that's been doing it for 10 years, somebody laying concrete flooring for 10 years, even something as inane and boring as that, they will have opinions and contrarian ideas that you can write about.
Beautiful. Ryan, thank you so much. I know we have a lot of questions here that are unanswered, so let's take the rest of the Q&A to Twitter. Ryan is there at thinking_slow, Ryan Law on Twitter. So yeah, guys, just hit Ryan up on Twitter there, follow him, all that stuff. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.